Long before she was Queen Mary I, or more infamously to her detractors as Bloody Mary, there was a young girl, born a princess, the firstborn child of King Henry VIII to reach adulthood, Mary, his daughter by Katherine of Aragon. So what was Mary's young life like? Who was involved in her christening? Spoiler, it would turn out to be highly ironic. What were the many marriage prospects created, and why didn't they go anywhere? And did she ever blame her father, rather than Anne Boleyn, for what befell her? Well, to discuss all of this and much more, I'm pleased to welcome back Dr Peter Stiffell onto the podcast for a discussion all about his favourite figure from history. So join us both as we dive into the world of the young Queen Mary I. Welcome back to the Tudor Chest podcast, episode 104, The Young Queen Mary I, with Dr Peter Stiffell. Welcome to the Tudor Chest podcast, Dr Peter Stiffell. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Adam. Yourself?
Very well, thanks. Thank you for coming back on the pod. You're here today to talk about, obviously, your favourite figure from history, Queen Mary I. You are Mr. Queen Mary I, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like she's my wife sometimes.
But we're here to talk about her young days, actually, which is a window of Mary's story that I think is perpetually overlooked. Before we get into that discussion, though, a few questions to get to know you a bit better. So could you provide me with a short introduction into your background, so where you grew up and what it is that you do full-time, I suppose, and where your passion for Mary came from?
Yeah, no, thanks, Adam. I think most people will know my story anyway, but yeah, so I'm in Kent, England, born and bred. I went to Chichester University to do my bachelor's, and then I came back to Kent to do my master's and PhD. I guess I've always liked kings and queens. We always taught kings and queens at school, and because my grandparents were staunch royalists, we always went to London. Always, stand up to attention when national anthems played and everything like that. And I've always, like I said, I've always loved kings and queens. When it comes to the Tudors, I guess we've always been fascinated about that soap opera family, right? But I think it was during A levels because and I know you despise the show, but I do like the Tudors. I know it's probably not.
I don't despise it. I just think
it's not accurate. We
Tudors
know.
Dumbed down, I think, is my.
But but I think Mary's story, actually, out of all the characters in the show, I do think they did Mary the best.
Agree.
And I do think, I think most of it was accurate, actually, apart from obviously a few bits. But yeah, that's when I really thought, oh, hang on, she's nothing like that we're taught at school. With the whole Bloody Mary thing. I've sort of just carried on that journey.
Yeah, and given today's subject, if you could go back and witness a moment from Mary's youth, what would it be?
Oh, that's so difficult, isn't it? What did she actually do as a kid, apart from reading, studying, praying, dancing? I guess I'd be really interested in see what her first word was, because we're always told that her first word was during a French embassy meeting. And, she's brought out and she starts crying, priest, priest. So, I'd like to see that, I guess. And I guess also the events surrounding her youth, like her christening and that sort of, who's there. You can get your little autograph book out and think, right, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so.
Based on portraits, you'd be like, oh, who are they?
Exactly. Well, yeah. If there's any decent ones at that time, it's like, well, hang on, here we Yeah, no, it's just, I guess I'd just like to be in her house and see what does a Tudor princess actually do. Because we don't really know, not really, How do the people interact with
Mm.
her? Uh, I mean, I guess it's not youth as such, but I guess when she's sent away later on, I would like to know how terrible it actually was for her.
Yes, and that
Bit awful, really, isn't
yeah,
it?
and that
Yeah.
moment when made when it's made clear to her the severity of her
Mm,
parents' marriage, just actually what was her reaction in that moment
yeah.
would be fascinating to see. If you had a opportunity to ask Mary a single question, and it could be when she's older, what would it be?
What's your favourite food?
Why that?
I don't know. It's just sort of one of those random things. I've always, obviously you've got the obvious questions. What do you like doing? What's your favourite colour? That sort of thing.
Mm,
What are your favourite jewels? I guess you can tell quite a lot about who someone is by what they eat.
yeah.
Um, and I'll just be interested to see, did she have as such a sweet tooth as we were told, and
Uh-huh.
what were her actual favourite foods? Because she was given apples and pears, and like, apparently pears were one of her favourite foods. But, oh, okay, okay, because you can obviously this the modern
Okay.
varieties of them, but you can sort of have that sort of connection with them. Okay, I know what she tasted. We know what it tasted like.
So to begin with, well, as I said at the start, well, you're here to talk about the young Mary the First, when she is ultimately Princess Mary, later Lady Mary, much to your chagrin, I know. And to begin with her birth in February 1516, she is the fifth of the pregnancies for Catherine of Aragon. Her sex is naturally a disappointment to her father, but her health must surely have been a relief. So, what were the court celebrations like? I mean, undoubtedly, I'm sure they were muted had she been male.
We all know Henry. He sort of just assumes every child he's going to have is a boy. So he obviously prepares all of these big jousts and celebrations. Yes, it's going to be a boy. It's going to be a boy, and obviously it's not. Um, I, it's very difficult because we don't really know. There weren't really that many celebrations, to be honest, because like we said, she's just a daughter. She's not seen as important. It's only with hindsight we can see that importance in terms of, well, in Henry's eyes anyway. I mean, Catherine obviously a
Mm,
daughter, and and like you said, she's the only healthy child that lives. So that automatically she's of importance, and I guess they were both very protective of her because you had that tragedy with Prince Henry before, years before, and thinking, oh, you've got a healthy child, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, think of how many kings and queens we could have had if
no.
they'd lived as infants. Um, yeah, I guess, yeah, because it's difficult because most of the celebrations sort of happened after they were christened, which was, either the next day or a couple of days after. And yeah, so when she was actually born, I mean, I assume there
Mm.
must have been, gun salutes and all that sort of thing as per usual. But yeah, in terms of actual celebrations on that day, it's difficult to tell really.
Yeah, and I suspect because it was also the fifth pregnancy and there were no siblings living, I suppose one could argue maybe there was also that just let's wait and see before we celebrate because the king and queen's pregnancies had not been successful until that point.
Yeah, no, exactly. Let's save the money and all the celebrations first, just in case something happened.
Yeah. Talk to me about the christening. Was that, I assume, quite a grand affair?
Yes, no, so that happened the next day, because obviously you have to get them christened so their souls are saved before anything does happen. Yeah, so it was at the Church of the Observant Friars, which was in Greenwich, and like I said earlier, everyone who was everyone was there. The extended royal family, all those loyal courtiers who'd served Henry and his father. So the actual procession starts with Henry Courtenay, Earl of Devon,
Hmm.
who had the basin. Then it was Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, who held like the taper, so like a big candle. You had the Marquis of Dorset, who held the salt, because obviously the salt's very important for the actual baptism. Then you had Lady Dorset, who carried the chrism, and then you obviously have everyone else piling through. And then the last person to appear was Elizabeth Howard, Countess of Surrey, who'd obviously become Duchess of Norfolk. who held Mary in her arms. It's sort of, did you see that depiction of Edward's christening? I think it was at the Six Lives exhibition.
Can't remember. I went to the exhibition, but I can't remember that.
Yeah, so you had this massive court roll, and obviously it showed Edward, but you sort of just imagine it was that,
Hmm.
but obviously for Mary. So yeah, so you got Elizabeth Howard with Mary, and then they're underneath a canopy. But it's actually quite interesting to see who was actually
Hmm.
holding the canopy. So you had Nicholas, is it
Though.
Vaux, Vol,
Mm.
Val, Vo, thank you. Thomas Parr,
Okay.
um, Mary's great great uncle Sir Edward Ab Owen. So we said, oh, okay, I don't know who he is, but that sounds interesting. And guess who the fourth man was?
Thomas Boleyn.
Yeah,
Was it?
it was, yeah. I mean, how ironic is this? So yeah, you have all of that, and this is all outside of the church. And then
Yeah.
Mary was named. Her godmothers was Catherine of York, who was obviously Countess of Devon, and Agnes Howard, the Duchess of Norfolk. Francois the First was her godfather, but he'd been insulted because he wanted a personal invite written by Henry, and obviously we know Henry didn't like writing. So he said, "Well, I'm not coming then." So Thomas Wolsey had to represent him. So yeah, so
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you've been to christenings before. You know, it's sort of the same thing. Godparents renounce the devil. They have a confession of faith. You've got the blessing. She's then signed with the cross. You then have the salt to exorcise the devil, and then everyone goes inside, and it's all repeated. You have another exorcism, the blessing, anointing, and then she's obviously then put over the font and baptized with holy water. But the
Hmm.
font that was used was actually used by Henry VIII as well, and had been sent from Christchurch in Canterbury. So you know, it is actually it's a really important thing. Um, and then back then, so you had your confirmation and baptism at the same time, again because you have to sort of get through the whole initiation of the church because you don't actually know how long the child's going to live. And then she has her confirmation with Margaret Pole as her godmother. And then obviously
Hmm.
everyone has a big feast and everyone goes back to the palace, probably as drunk as Mary. But
So, how quickly was Mary appointed her own household, and what was its scale?
yeah, now again, it's quite difficult because obviously we know about the Ludlow stuff, but that's years later. In theory, her household's created since she's born because she doesn't really live with her parents at all as any royal child. You know, it's all separated, so they all have their own.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how many people actually are needed for a babe for a 2, 3 day-year-old. So you have your wet nurses, the people in charge of the cradle. Um, I don't know if you actually need a secretary or scribe or something, but that maybe just to order things. But I guess at these very, very early stage, it must have come under
Hmm.
the king and queen's household. And then, as she then gets older, she then has
Yeah,
her
you'd
own
have think,
household.
you'd
So,
imagine so.
and a natural household we can say is a natural household. It's probably maybe when she's 1 or 2. But I mean, it's very difficult to tell because no one really talks about it because there's not really any mention of her for the first 2 years of her life
Hmm.
because she's just a baby. Like, what's there to say? She's just in the cradle playing with her toys or something.
Yeah. So her half sister Elizabeth, yeah, and we're jumping forward a bit here, but it'll make sense, is repeatedly described as being exceptionally intelligent. But Mary must surely have also had a very good education as well.
Well, yes, in some ways she did have a better one, and in some ways not. It's yeah, Mary's taught by the best of the best. So she's taught Latin by her mum, Catherine, and Dr. Richard
Hmm.
Featherstone, who your viewers may know because he's the guy in Lady Jane. He's like the nice priest. Um, I don't know how accurate that is. Yeah. So if you've seen the film and the
Ah,
really
yes.
nice guy in it, he's like that's him. So they
Same
taught
actor who played, it's the same actor who played Thomas Boleyn in Anne of a Thousand Days.
yeah, yes it is, isn't it? So yeah, she was taught Latin. I mean, I think some historians have sort of argued, you actually learn Latin before your natural language, I guess. Because I think it's either James V or James VI makes that comment saying,
Hmm.
I learned Latin before I learned Scots. Because everyone, it's the universal language. Everyone knows it, or anyone that she needs to
Hmm.
interact with will know it. She was taught French by Giles Dewey, who'd also taught Henry VIII. So you have this sort of legacy, really,
Hmm.
of everyone who her father had been taught by. Sort of, right, we know you're good at your job, so we're going to do this. She may have learnt Greek. We're not sure, but there was some sort of interaction through Thomas Linacre,
Hmm.
who was like this group of Western scholars who'd not discovered ancient Greek, but they wanted to learn ancient Greek. So she may have learned ancient. She may have learned a little bit of Greek. In terms of books, Juan Luis Vives wrote those three famous
Okay.
books, which definitely influenced Mary, and Catherine orchestrated this. So you got the Instruction of Christian Women, who dealt with, well, women really. It's the three stages of a female life, really. So you've got virgin, wives, widows. He then also made a children's educational book, which Mary's actually mentioned in it, and it includes materials for like reigning or for like future queenship. Um, Whether or not he intended that to happen, it's sort of debated, but
Okay.
you can see where Mary had been influenced. But I guess the most personal, I guess, influential book that Vives wrote for, well, dedicated to Mary, and Mary, you can tell Mary took this on board, was Satellitum Sive Symbols. Um, so it's like a book of symbols and mottos and that sort of thing. Which motto that Mary took to her grove? Veritas Temporis Filia. The motto she uses when she's then queen. You can obviously, that's really cemented. And I mean, she studied more Erasmus, the usual ancient philosophers, as well as modern. I mean, maybe John Fisher, I don't know. And then obviously, the courtly stuff, so dancing, playing cards, when she's obviously older, hawking. She's a very cultured
Yeah.
humanist by the end of it.
And she obviously also spoke Spanish. Was that from her mother?
Yeah, we know she spoke Spanish when she was with Catherine. Whether she actually spoke Spanish later in life is we're not quite sure because obviously if you're not using it a lot, you do forget. But we know she understood Spanish and she understood Italian and maybe Greek, and obviously she knows English, Latin, and French. So she's very well
Yeah.
rounded. She really
So
is.
she's probably spoke at least five languages fluently.
Yeah, easily.
So at what point do we know that she definitely began living separately from her parents with a big household and where?
Well, I guess the most significant time when she's living away from her parents is in 1525 when she's sent to Ludlow.
Yeah.
That's the furthest she is from her parents at that stage. Before that, they may be at Hampton Court, she's at Grayton, but they were always close by because obviously you had to be really.
Yeah, and that move to Ludlow, so that's the Welsh Marches, that's ultimately the seat, really, of the Prince of Wales. So when she's sent there, until her brother hopefully comes along, she is Henry VIII's legitimate heir. So by sending her to Wales, was it optically making it clear she is Princess of Wales, even though she's never actually invested as that? Do you think that's how it was perceived?
Yeah, short answer, definitely. Yeah, because like you said,
Okay.
she was never invested and she was never granted it by letters patent. But not every Prince of Wales was given either of those either. Jumping forward, Edward VI isn't given invested or given the letters patent of Prince of Wales. The fact she's
Yeah. Well, neither's Prince
no,
William. Prince William hasn't been
not
invested.
invest, no, not invest. No, he hasn't, has he? He's been given the
No.
letters patent, but not invested. Yeah, so the fact she's sent to Wales and she has her own household, and people call her the Princess of Wales. Like the documents in related to that say that she's the princess, or I'm in the service of Mary, Princess of Wales. So people did call her the Princess of Wales, and everyone who knew that she'd been in Ludlow, well, of course
Hmm.
she is, because she's the eldest daughter of the king. Yeah, Without there being a boy, well, yeah,
Yeah.
of course she's the Princess of Wales. I mean, because we've never had a Princess of Wales in her own right. I mean, Elizabeth II wasn't called Princess of
No.
Wales because they didn't know what to call her future husband because he can't be the Prince of Wales. So Mary is sort of the only
Yeah.
Princess of Wales we've ever had, which I think is quite an achievement, actually.
Yeah, because we think of it now, obviously, as the wife of the Prince of Wales, but if there isn't a Prince of Wales in the line of succession, then by default, if there is a female, that it does make her the Princess of Wales.
Yeah, I mean, jumping to modern day, that's actually quite interesting, isn't it? Because if what would Charlotte be would have been if she'd been born before George, because she's the eldest, and
Well, there was an update. There was obviously the update to the line of succession that no longer favoured male birthright, which means Charlotte is ahead of Louis.
but would she have been the Princess of Wales or not?
But yeah, that is interesting. Had Charlotte been born before George, what would have happened around the Princess of Wales title?
It's interesting, isn't it? Oh, we'll have to wait till the next generation now. But yeah, it's still not solved this issue after how many centuries?
And when Mary goes to Ludlow as Princess of Wales, as we've said, although never officially ordained as the Princess of Wales, who were the most important people in her household?
So Richard Featherstone went with her. He was, her tutor, and we know Catherine was very influential and wanted updates to see how her daughter was. But I guess the most important person there was obviously Margaret Pole. That mother-daughter relationship. That's when it cemented, I think. I mean,
Mhm.
you can probably tell me more about it than I can, but
Definitely a second mother figure, as far as I'm concerned. I think Margaret was more devoted to Mary than any of her children, to be honest.
yeah. Well, and that's really what her job was to be. Her children were, they can make their own way, but this is the Princess of Wales. You've got to look after her. And obviously, when Catherine's gone, Margaret takes that role of mother to her death. And, no one really thinks about that, really. Mary lost two mothers in her life. But yeah, in terms of everyone else, I mean, it's usually just, the usual household people, really. I can't think of anyone on top of my head who was as important as Featherstone and Margaret.
Yeah, agreed. Mary is also naturally a major bridal prospect. She's a major European princess. The Tudors do put their children into marriage alliances at a very young age. Several marriage agreements are made for Mary in her youth. None come to fruition. So can you walk me through some of them and then ultimately what caused them to come to nothing?
Well, who wasn't she betrothed to? That's the question, isn't it? Yeah. So I mean, almost or nearly immediately, there's people thinking, oh, who should she marry? She needs to marry off quickly because Henry. Why don't you just think long term here? Um, so I guess the first main one was to the Dauphin of France in 1518. Mary's two, and I think the Dauphin's just been born, hasn't he? Or he's maybe a year
Yeah.
older. They're both very young. It's never going to happen. And this was part of some big the Treaty of London. So it's this big idea that Wolsey had of thinking, the England we'll have England for. It's like at school we were told it was sort of the first sort of feeling of having a United Nations sort of, European Union. Oh, if you get attacked by the Ottomans or something else or a foreign power, we'll all come and help you out. Obviously, it didn't work. So that was her first one, and then she's then engaged to Charles V, who's her cousin, Holy Roman
Mhm.
Emperor in 1522. And Catherine's all for this. So yes, definitely.
I was about to ask, what do we know? I mean, obviously, Catherine is all for that. Did Catherine air her opinions on the French prospect?
I don't think she did in public. We can imagine what they were
Okay.
in private. I mean, there may be one or two comments that she
Yeah.
made. Um, and I think there might have been a couple of ambassador reports which say, you can tell the Queen's not happy about this. But, Catherine knows it's the duty of a woman to marry. And, if her husband says that she's going to marry the
Hmm.
France, fine. We just deal with it. Um, but obviously, Catherine would tell Mary, don't ever trust what your husband says or anything like this because they're French. Yeah, so obviously Charles in 1522, and they do meet. Charles is very gracious to Mary, and Mary adores Charles because as a 6-year-old, who wouldn't like their teenager cousin? But obviously that fails because one, Charles is older and he does need a wife quickly, and there's events, in his kingdom that then he sorts out because he's not just Holy Roman Emperor, he's King of Spain as well, and he needs a regent sort of figure to look after Spain while he's
Mm,
going around what is now Germany. So plus he needs lots of money. He wants that dowry, and Henry just the trouble with Henry is he wants all these foreign alliances with Mary to be married to whoever, but because she's the only child, he doesn't want her leaving England. Well, no foreign powers going to ever agree to that.
yeah.
Um, there are then talks with her marrying James V of Scotland. That's due to Margaret Tudor obviously thinking, oh, hang on a minute, here we go, we can unite the crowns automatically. Again, nothing really comes off that. Um, and then it's sort of like Mary's sort of betrothed to Charles, the Dauphin, and to Francois the First, sort of all at the same time. It's sort of very mixed. You're sort of playing everyone against each other, and everyone else is thinking, well, hang on a minute,
Mm,
who is she actually betrothed to? Because we're not actually quite sure. Um, yeah, so I guess her last
yeah.
betrothal as a young child was to Francois the First in around 1525, 26. And obviously, luckily, that falls through because obviously
Mhm.
a certain lady becomes important, shall we say?
Yeah, and we'll undoubtedly discuss Anne Boleyn, but sort of as part of that, as we know, religion would play a colossal role in Mary's life. As best we can tell, was she deeply pious from her earliest days, or do you believe
Mm.
the traumas of her adolescence really increased that, or was it always there?
I mean, as a kid, I don't think she was really. I mean, of course she was past because everyone was past back then. It was, it's not an extremist, if that's it's not the right terminology, but that's what we should use. Just use that because it's easier
Yeah,
to
she wasn't a zealot.
Exactly. She wasn't as zealot as such. Yeah, I do think the traumas she then had to go through, I think, because that was her only constant. She's separated from her parents, her mother dies, everything around her starts collapsing. Thinking, well, I don't know what is
Mm,
going on. There must be a reason this is happening. So obviously she turned to her faith. And, I mean, we've all had that sort of thing when things go wrong, you turn to your faith because that's the only thing that will get you through the trauma or whatnot. And again, like I said, it's the only constant. Yeah, and then obviously she does then become that staunch supporter of the true religion. I don't think as a child, I mean, she obviously understood the importance of it, and this is what you do. I mean, I guess it's if you're surrounded by that whole thing all the time, I guess you don't think of it any different until, like I said, the world goes mad.
At what point do you believe Mary first became aware of the true scale of her father's intentions with Anne Boleyn?
I think she was quite protected by Margaret, because obviously Margaret could see the warning signs, and Catherine wouldn't have said anything
Hmm.
because she would have. I think Catherine again, she probably just ignored it all as well. She really noticed. It's just another, it's just another Betty Blount situation. It'll soon go away. It's not going to interfere. Even Betty Blount, and she had a son. That's it's nothing. We're safe. We're safe. I think in the late 20s when because Mary must have realised about the Blackfriars court and everything. I mean, I don't know how you can't not know that. I mean, she's only a child, but everyone would have been talking about it. I mean, all of London was talking about it. All of London witnessed it. She must have realised, hang on a minute, mum and dad aren't seeing each other as much privately as they were. I mean, publicly, of course, nothing's changed. But privately, thinking, well, hang on, where is mum and dad? And kids are they understand the nuances and when things are slightly changing. I think they're more attuned to it than adults, actually. So yeah, I guess it's before everything kicks off. I think she realised, and then obviously when she doesn't actually get to see him, she leaves Windsor because her and Catherine are separated after their visiting to Windsor. I think that's when she thought, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is real now. What is going on? And then obviously, when Elizabeth's born, it sort of cements it.
Yeah, and is it at that point that there is a considerable lessening in Mary's household, or had that started before Anne Boleyn actually became queen?
Again, it's difficult because what is a lesson of a household? Just because you've moved to smaller place, okay, maybe you don't need as many people. But she was the only heir at that point. And Henry can't start dismantling the household until he has another heir. It's only when
Hmm.
Elizabeth's born, people say, because I don't know how true this is, but I think there were rumors going around that, oh, he's going to name Elizabeth Mary just to sort of legitimize herself more. I'm thinking, well, no, you've got two daughters, Mary. But right, okay. I mean, obviously, it never happened.
I've heard that rumor
Yeah.
as well, though. I have heard that.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's once Elizabeth's born and then Mary's. I mean, because it's done overnight. One, one eve she goes to bed as a princess of Wales, well, as a princess. Then she wakes up next morning and everyone, is it Thomas Howard or whoever comes down and says, right, you're going to be called Lady Mary now. She,
Yeah.
what? I've got to serve this? What? Who do you think you are? Yes, it's that. I think
Yeah.
it's at that point. That's when the household just dissolves.
Yeah. And when her household is dissolved, as we know, she eventually does enter the service of her infant sister Elizabeth. But did Mary still possess some servants? I mean, she would have still had some people looking after her,
I
surely.
mean, she must have. I mean, I can't see her not having anyone. Um, I mean, obviously, it was very much reduced because she was now a servant,
Mm.
really. But I think even in that Elizabeth's household, there must have been people who thought, let's, we've got to be careful because obviously she's still royal blood. But I
Yeah.
think, is it Lady Bryan who's in charge of Elizabeth's household?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think obviously she's always been portrayed as this very stern woman and very much to the book. But I think, and like I said, I mean I don't know, I've had no evidence of this whatsoever. But I think I read somewhere where she's she's obviously very strict and stern to Mary in public, but in private she does help her out a little bit. So which she's in a very difficult position because she has to
Hmm.
do what her niece tells her to do, but then she also sees the injustice of what's happening. Um,
Yeah.
but Mary, she does sort of fight back because every time Elizabeth's household moves, Mary always insists on riding in front and sort of
Yeah.
saying, "I'm actually more important." And I don't know how many times she got away with it, but that that cockiness, I guess, really.
Yeah. And she never acknowledges Anne as
That
queen. She famously says, if the king's mistress will
yeah, is it?
sue."
I recognise no queen but my mother, but if the king's mistress would talk to the king on my behalf, I'll be most grateful. But yes, and then I think there's another case as well when it's some sort of cooking, like someone has to cook something or make a meal, and Mary goes, "Well, unfortunately, my parents didn't see it fit that I learned how to cook, so I can't actually do anything to help you," or like something along those lines.
Brilliant. On that point around Anne Boleyn and Mary's ever decreasing place in the world, do you think it ever crossed her mind? Do you think she ever considered that ultimately it's her father who is responsible here? Or was all the angst directed at Anne?
Subconsciously, she knew, but she could never admit it because if she admitted it, then everything, I mean, everything was falling apart anyway. And I think that would have completely broken her, knowing that the one person who she always thought
Hmm.
loved her didn't. She thought it's easier if I just blame the other woman and didn't help the situation, but it's not, it takes two to tango. It's not her. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, Henry's the one who decides to dissolve the
Right.
household. He's the one who treats Mary as this servant to Elizabeth. Henry's decision is law. And I don't think Mary could ever, she could never come to terms with that. I mean, even when she's brought back into the court and succession, I don't think she could ever not. I think she forgave her father, but she would never forget what happened. And I think that's why she's so protective over Edward. And when she sees what Edward's doing when he's king, she's thinking, "Stop! You need to stop. Let me be your mother because I knew your mother, and I'm trying to be your mother figure." I think
Yeah.
it just breaks her because again, another man has just overridden her and destroyed her life. Like I said, I think she did know it was Henry,
Yeah. She'd never have
but no,
vocalized it,
yeah,
but deep
but
down.
she could never accept it because if she or acknowledge it because if she did, it would have just broken her.
Yeah. Again, is Henry is very much, I think, to blame for Catherine and Mary's separation, certainly towards the end of
Mm.
Catherine's life. It's always struck me as one of the cruelest things Henry VIII does in separating mother and daughter. So, when was the last time that we know that they definitely met? And I trust there was a lot of regular communication via letters right up until the end.
When's the last time she sees her? It's before Elizabeth's born, obviously. But yeah, in terms of communication, I mean, Catherine obviously did communicate with Mary, but it was very restricted. I mean, we're going by Shapley's, descriptions about all of
Okay.
this, so we have to take with a little bit of pinch of salt. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's more ingenious ways of getting letters across without people knowing. There's a famous orange, orange, orange case, isn't there? When is it the Duchess of Norfolk or someone who puts a note in orange, or it's someone who puts a note in orange, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the Duchess of Norfolk conveyed a letter concealed in an orange, I think, from Catherine to
Yeah.
Mary.
So those sort of things probably did happen. So I mean, Mary must have had some sort of thing because I don't know how she would have coped otherwise. Obviously, she was separated from Margaret, but again, Margaret, you know, she's a resourceful woman, as we know. There's ways of
Mm,
paying servants or bribing people, saying, can you just not see this? Um, yes, so we don't really know the last time they actually communicated. No, I don't think we do. I mean, there's obviously a few letters in the
hmm.
in the 20s and everything else, but they must have communicated after their separation. But I mean, we'll never know. We'll never know what the last letter was.
Yeah. And again, it's so interesting to consider whether Mary was cognizant of the fact that it is her father that's done
Mm,
this, or again, if she blamed Anne. And I think it will have very much been, and as we've already discussed, she knew that it's her
yeah.
father,
I
but
mean,
she could never
I
admit
guess I
that.
think she would always blame Anne, but then after Anne's
Yeah.
execution and things don't get better, I think that's when she suddenly realized, okay, it wasn't just Anne because she's as surprised as anyone when she hears of the news and she thinks, right, that's it, I'm going to be back, welcome back with open arms, and she's not. I think, where's my father, who's meant to be this knight in shining armor, to come and rescue me from the devil? It's like, well,
Yeah. And with Catherine's death, do you think that there was ever a world in which Anne and Mary could have gotten along?
no way, no.
Just too much bad blood?
It's too much bad blood, and Anne didn't help herself because there's always these rumors going around that Anne's trying to kill Mary or Mary's. You know, I mean, I don't know how true it is in the Tudor scene, but probably not true at all. But there's that scene, isn't there, with Anne, and she says, one of us is going to die, and obviously I'm trying to make sure it's not me. Because she knows well,
Mm,
that's why Catherine and Mary were separated because there were fears if Catherine and Mary joined forces, they had enough support to oust Henry if it ever came to it. And I don't, whether
yeah.
Charles would actually come over to help is another matter altogether. But domestically, everyone could think, well, hang on a minute. If I don't like the king, maybe this is a good opportunity to oust him, marry his daughter, and here's the new king and queen of England. And that's what
Mm,
Henry was so fearful of because he knew what Catherine and Mary's heritage with Isabel of Castile. Yeah, you do not mess with the Trastamaras.
yeah. And with Anne's execution, and you sort of hinted at this a moment ago, but Mary likely hoped that things are going to be immediately different. She's going to be welcomed back with open arms. So, do we have any written evidence of just the shock that she faced when it became clear that she wasn't back in favour until she accepted her father's royal supremacy?
Yeah, it was a shock, and I think when she's then faced with this document, I don't think she reads it, does she? She just signs it. She just signs it
No, just
because then
signs
she can
it.
say, well, I don't know what I signed. And then she also then has that reassurance. with Chapuis, saying, it's okay because your cousin and the Pope have an arrangement, so your soul's safe, because that's what it's all about. It's her soul. Does she live mortally but risk damnation for accepting that she was always illegitimate, or do you
Yeah.
accept that and just risk the soul bit later? But because she has that reassurance by Chapuis, that saying that the Pope's, don't worry about it, we've sorted it, you'll be okay. You just have to sign something else or make some sort of act of declaration saying, I'm doing this under duress. Um, yeah, that's like I said, that's when she thinks, okay, it's actually Daddy
Mm.
who's doing this. Why is he doing this? We, Elizabeth isn't important anymore. You still now you've got no heirs.
Yeah.
Like, come on, not everyone already thinks I'm the Princess of Wales anyway. Because when she's in that Elizabeth's household, people get beaten. They get beaten or told they get told off for they keep referring to her as Princess and not Lady Mary. I mean, obviously Mary never accepts that until she has to, and
Yeah.
this is where the royal supremacy comes in, and with Cromwell and everyone else, it's you
Yeah.
need to just do this because we're trying to help you. You need to think, stop thinking with your heart and think
Yeah.
with your head just for a minute.
And on that point, I think in large part thanks to Wolf Hall, Thomas Cromwell has began to sort of take on this slight perception as being Mary's saviour at the time, saving her from herself. Is that in any way
Mm.
accurate?
I mean, yes. I mean, we know Cromwell and Mary also interacted, and Cromwell does eventually visit Mary and say, you need to just do this, just do it for everyone's sake. So, is he her saviour? Well, to Cromwell's eyes, probably. Whether it was to Mary's eyes, it's difficult. It's not like she left any notes saying, "Oh, it's thanks to Thomas Cromwell that I'm surviving" and all this sort of stuff. Obviously, she would thank him publicly and say, "Oh no, thank you, Master Cromwell, for showing me the errors of my ways and all this sort of stuff." But no, Wolfall it is very good, and I do like the relationship they have with Cromwell and Mary. But obviously, Wolfall is very much Cromwell's version of events.
Yeah. Once Mary is reinstated to court, she accepts the royal supremacy, as you've already said. She signs her name at the bottom of the paper without even reading it. It does obviously transform her life in that very moment. So she's welcomed back to court. How does it change? Do we have a sense on when she does come back? Is she immediately given a greater wardrobe allowance? Is she given more ladies? What do we know of that moment when she comes back?
Yeah, it's as if nothing changed. It's as if nothing ever happened for the last 10 years. It's like
Okay.
she's immediately given an allowance and ladies and, a wardrobe, which she obviously takes to great advantage. Thinking, thank you, like, I can actually buy some clothes now. She's given her own apartments. Henry treats her like as he always did before all the mess.
Yeah.
He's her daughter. I mean, obviously, he never says she's the heir or the princess, which probably annoyed Mary. But she just at least I'm back, and I can slowly work towards getting full recognition. Um, because obviously the court's changed as well. Half the people she would have grown up with have been killed or they've died.
Yeah.
Her mother's not there. Wolsey's not there. Um, Thomas More's not there. John Fisher's not there. Monks aren't there. It's no. The bishops are all sorts of Cranmer's sort of people now. Thinking, oh, hang on a minute. So she has to be very careful with who she talks about. I mean, obviously she's got
Mm.
Gardner when he returns and everything else. So I don't want to say factions as such, but there are people she can turn to, but she doesn't. She needs to be very careful because she doesn't want to start being accused of being some sort of ringleader.
Yeah. And I suppose also she's a different person now as well because she's now a grown up as well. So she re-enters court as a grown woman. And so immediately she's not going to need a governess necessarily,
Mm.
in the way that she would have done as a child. So not only is the court changed, but she's changed as well.
Yeah, she's what is she? Well, she's in her mid-20s at this point, isn't she? When she returned, so she should have
Mm,
been married years ago. She should have had her own children. So she's sort of this not a lonely figure, I guess, because she obviously had friends, and but she was always very motherly. And I think they're not jealous as such, but she's thinking, oh, I could have had my own children now, could have given my father a grandson. Hey, hey. Obviously, that never happened. Um, but yeah, and
yeah,
yeah, her relationship with the other wives, is it's ups and downs, isn't it? She liked Jane Seymour. Um, Anna Cleves she liked. Hated Catherine Howard, but well, as far as we know, they hated each other. I don't know, but you can see where they would not have agreed with things. And then obviously Catherine Parr, it's sort of that complex relationship, isn't it?
yeah,
Things go up and down with that. Um, but yeah, she's the second lady of the court. I
yeah,
mean, and when Catherine Howard's executed, she becomes the first woman of court. She has to organise the Christmas celebrations and everything else. Like, she does have that, and I think she did enjoy that power and that that responsibilities. She can actually do something, and she can do what she wants in reason, and her father trusts
yeah.
her to do it.
I was going to ask you about that as well. Yeah, because one of the things, and this is a rare thing from me, one of the things I really liked about the Tudors is also that you see that maturity in Henry and Mary's relationship in the Tudors in that moment, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when Catherine Howard, Henry, and Mary are at a church service, and Mary's natural talent for winning people over and for not being a sort of whining brat in the way that Catherine is portrayed, even though I don't believe she was. Do, do you think that was slightly mirrored in real life? Do you think that they reached a point where Henry recognised the power of his daughter's hold over the English people?
Yeah, I mean, I think he always knew that. And that's why, like I said earlier, he was so scared when everything was kicking off with Catherine and Mary, because put them together, they'll
Mm,
be unstoppable. Because we know where the English people will side with this. As you said, I mean, yeah, I know the scene. I don't know how true it is, but I think Mary, Mary was brought up to be a queen, and she, like her mother, she knew how to be regal and dignified. Whereas Catherine Howard, she wasn't brought up like that. Right, I mean, I don't know how true it is, but she wasn't. There's a difference, isn't there, between born of royal blood and marrying into royal blood, and the age difference and everything else. I don't know if it's the same episode or if it's the next episode. It's when they go to York. Now, I can't remember if Mary does actually go to York with her father on that progress. But that's that scene when people are crying out for Princess Mary or Lady Mary, Lady Mary, and she then gives a
yes,
sort of speech, and you
pride.
can see
Yeah.
Henry's pride. You know what? You've done okay, girl. You really have. Never mind the stuff that I did do to you, but you've come through it. It was a test, and you've passed the test.
Yeah, I think there would have been that. Ultimately, she was his firstborn. I think he loved her deeply. It's one of the better things about the Tudors, certainly, is that relationship that you see play out with Henry and Mary towards the end, because I think it would have been reflected like that in real life.
It's weird, isn't it? Because you think after everything he did, and he would never admit it, but he did love Mary, and Elizabeth. Obviously, I think there was that he had to be distant with her because of obviously what happened to her mother and the whole thing. And obviously he loved Jane because Edward was born, but
Mm,
that's because Jane could do no wrong, and she didn't have long enough to do anything wrong. Whereas Henry, and I've always said Henry did love Catherine.
it's more.
They're married for 20 odd
Yeah.
years, longer than everyone else put together. There's a
Oh, I
reason
agree.
why it lasted that long, and the reason why he kept
Yeah.
trying to have a child. And Mary was that success eventually. And I think he would have been proud of her when she becomes queen because, okay, I didn't want a daughter to become queen, but
Mm,
you've done the family proud because you've carried on the line. And then obviously, what happens. And I think, eventually he would have been proud
yeah.
of Elizabeth for what she did as well, but he'd never admit it.
Well, I mean, she's the great irony, isn't she, of Henry's life? really, that it's Elizabeth who is viewed as superseding her father. It's the great irony that he would never have ever imagined or would want to admit to. But I agree. I think he'd have been proud of both his daughters very much. And, Mary being the first true Queen Regnant is no small feat.
No, exactly. You can only have one, and she's done it.
Well, thank you very much for coming on today and having a chat about the young Mary. This has been really fun. So what are you working on at the moment? I believe you've been doing quite a bit of stuff with Spink and their coins and things like that. What have you been involved in?
So we have this, obviously you spoke to Greg about the Spinks auction, which is on the 30th of September. So if anyone has some spare cash or they just want to see beautiful gold coins from, I think it's from Henry III onwards, all the way to the present day. So that's the 30th of September. So I've been helping with the catalogue of the Mary stuff and trying to give the history of those coins. What do these symbols actually mean? What does the lettering say, and that sort of thing. So there's that. And I have my website, which is live, drpeterstiffell.com, where you can see a lot of images of Mary, and it will be updated as and when I get legal permissions to put the things up. But you've got loads of paintings on there at the moment. You've got all of her seals, which is very interesting. Her coinage is up there. Well, Queen's Bench rolls, and there's a few charters and patents and that sort of thing. Just so you can see sort of it is literally some of these, when it eventually gets completed, it would literally be either a week-to-week comparison of the image, because these documents were made so often. It's fascinating to see, especially once she's married Philip. Oh, okay, actually, where are they portrayed and how are they portrayed? Yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's lovely to have you back, and we'll speak soon.
Definitely. Thank you, Adam.
And so that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Tudor Chest podcast. My thanks to Dr. Stiffell for coming back onto the show, and my thanks to you, the listener, for tuning in. Next week, I'm going to be out on tour as part of my tour company, Simply Tudor Tours. So I will be releasing one of my subscriber-only episodes as the weekly episode so that those listening can get a sense on what the subscriber episodes are like. That will drop next Thursday. If you've got any suggestions for future podcast episodes, please do reach out to me via Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for listening to the Tudor Chest podcast, and talk to you next week.